Welcome to the Candid CISO podcast, where we are illuminating your path to impact. Hey CISOs and CISOs in training, Steve here, and welcome to the Candid CISO podcast, where we talk candidly about the CISO world, what's great about it, what's not so great, and a few things in between. As 2024 starts, being a CISO is tougher work than ever. I do not envy you CISOs. You have to be one step ahead of security threats at all times, ahead of the evolution of AI and boardroom challenges among many other things. So whether you're unwinding from your job, studying for an exam, staying in shape, or running a few dozen miles like I like to do, training for marathons while listening to podcasts, I hope you'll join us as we get a little bit candid. So what does it mean to be candid? This is what we're going to find out on this episode. At least 3 ideas align with being a candid CISO, and we'll talk about them, share some trade secrets, and yes, a chin wag. One idea we'll explore is honesty. Being a CISO, your goal is to protect. However, you might wonder when it's time for the gloves to come off and when you should keep that professional image. When should you speak to your team like they're your bros, and when is it time to let the jargon come in? When should the tie come off and the hoodie come on? How and when should you be a nonconformist in the boardroom and express unpopular views? The second is focusing on the people, not just the organization. How do security breaches affect the everyday person, and how can one be more holistic with their approach to security? Finally, the idea of building references. How can you network with others in this community, share your knowledge without sounding like a know-it-all, and learn from others? How do you not only form connections, but make good friends? Breaking into the security world is challenging and sometimes harder than maintaining security. At least I know that from my own experience. Luckily, we're going to have some really great ideas and answers to explore. Joining me to look at these ideas is my co-host, John Donovan, and also with us is our special guest, Chris Roberts. He's a researcher, a hacker, not a heckler, maybe a heckler, with many talents and technical names under his belt. He's an advisory board member to several companies and is currently senior director and CISO at Boom Supersonic, with projects focused on threat intelligence, cryptography, AI, identity, and the services space. So we have the tea and biscuits ready for this Scottish security warlock as we dive into being a candid CISO. But before we get too candid, I'd like to share a few words from our Season 1 sponsor. Are you spending too much time and money on identity management operations, fintech compliance, security, and complex point integrations? Are you struggling with technical debt, multi-cloud data silos, vendor lock, and a subpar customer experience? Do you need an efficient way to adopt modern digital ID solutions like Know Your Customer, MFA, Identity Proofing Verification, Zero Trust, and Web3? IDRamp's integrated identity platform is here to address your needs. Integrated Identity offers a comprehensive orchestration solution that automates operations, integrations, compliance, security, and digital transformation. It operates above the clouds and across diverse infrastructures, offering seamless support of legacy systems and the latest advancements in ID security and Web3 decentralization. Digital identity should be a strategic business asset, not a security burden that is expensive to maintain and slow to innovate. So contact IDRamp today to learn how integrated identity can help improve your business by visiting them at idramp.com/CandidCISO. Well, this is a crowd. We have 3, so I think we can get started.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I've got water. I'm good. I'm in good shape. It's just like literally off one onto another. I got liquid. We're good. I need a G&T. It's that time of the afternoon where I want a gin and tonic.
Chris, we really appreciate you taking some time here, to be with us. We're just looking to have a good conversation here today, but also, I really want to talk a bit about, so this is our inaugural episode, a little bit about what I think it means to be a candid CISO, and then I've got some questions for you around that once we get into it a bit. But before I do want to start off just a little bit and say thank you to Steve, who's joining us as a third special guest here today. So we'll have a 3-way conversation. Just why don't you talk a bit, Steve, about the Nonconformist Innovation Group and kind of what got us started over here with Candid CISO.
Yeah, John. So to kick things off very quickly, my career hit a brick wall in 2015. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. I had a couple of stints in the startup world and tried to find my way back to corporate America, and it wouldn't work. There was a graphing issue, and it dawned on me that maybe I should try something different. I found myself unemployed. I was fortunate to have a little bit of money saved, so I didn't have to go back to work. And I asked myself, what's going to get me out of bed today? Right? It's not coffee because I drink my coffee and read the news from bed. And and I was just, thinking, just trying to be radically honest with myself. What is it, Steve? I came to realize that innovation, starting new things, was really exciting to me. And the more I spent thinking about that, it wasn't just any new thing. Everyone has heard of disruptive innovation and Clayton Christensen and all the trending academic conversations around that from Harvard Business School. But I wanted to put my own spin on it. So I called it the Nonconformist Innovation Podcast, which was we can't just have capitalism as usual. We because that's failing, right? We need to think about things a little differently. We can't just serve shareholders. Uh, in the world of data breaches, they affect minorities and vulnerable populations disproportionately. And I wanted to do something about that. So the nonconformity for me was we're going to swerve, right? Not conforming to the needs of the shareholders. We're going to look at all of the stakeholders from all different angles and from every stage of the business world, from startup. Tom Kemp was an excellent first guest on my podcast. He had just sold his company, ironically. And then we've had some other amazing guests to help explore that world from angles, right? Ethical leadership, entrepreneurship, innovation. Richard Clark was on there, so I haven't gone too deep on in the political world, but we've seen those perspectives, right? So I didn't want to have a security podcast, and so the idea for the Candid CISO was to take the same idea, but to firmly plant it around information needs and trends that CISOs are thinking about.
Steve, thanks so much for that. And I did want to kind of kick it back to some things from nonconformist innovation. I've had the pleasure of participating in and listening to a number of those podcasts, and I agree with you. There's definitely room here for in the many security and CISO kind of focused podcasts that are out there for something that maybe we get a little more real. And so, what do I think it means to be a candid CISO, and what are we looking to accomplish with this podcast? Have real and candid conversations with practitioners like our guest here, Chris Roberts, today. Share some interesting stories and maybe leave our audience with a few bits of practical advice, or at least some things that will make them think a bit. And so, kind of with that, I'm not going to dive into much about me. People will hear that in the first kicker for our series here. But Chris, first of all, thanks for joining us. And can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thanks for having me, especially on the inaugural one. It's kind of cool. I'm looking forward to this. Especially, let's face it, when you talk about nonconformist, I don't fit that profile. I think it's tattooed on my bloody forehead half the time. Let's face it. And it's weird because it's not a deliberate thing. So yeah, a little bit about me. Let's see. Currently CISO for Boom Supersonic, as well as do a bunch of stuff behind the scenes from a research standpoint. Obviously a hacker, and from an inquisitive tinkerer and a number of other things. Formerly jumped out of airplanes for a living, and got kicked off of submarines as well for a living. And then prior to that, also got yelled at a few times within the early days of the computing world. So I've been creeping around this industry for longer than I probably should admit to, longer than this thing's been growing, let's put it that way. And yeah, I'm still here, and I've straddled the line between like .gov, .mil on the vendor side a number of times, including my own companies, and then obviously now back on the client side of things, should we say?
Chris, thanks for that kind of little background about yourself. Most folks who Google Chris Roberts will see all kinds of things about some of the areas he was speaking about before. But before we dive into things like Hacker Summer Camp and other things like that are coming up here, um, I guess what does it mean to be candid from your perspective? And let me ask you kind of a second part of that two-part question, which is how does this change when you move from being kind of that security practitioner to being in the trenches or jumping out of the airplanes to becoming a leader, right? So I guess that's first thing is candid, and then how did it change for you?
I think the candid thing is comes with the honesty and integrity side of it. So at the end of the day, when we look at our industry, we got one job, and that's to protect. That's it. When it all boils down, we have a single job to do. And to Steve's point, it shouldn't necessarily be how do we just protect the organization. It should be how do we protect the people inside the organization. How do we look after the very data that somebody has entrusted to us? I mean, I'm fortunate. At Boom at the moment, we're very, very focused, obviously, on the plane, the aviation, the engines, all sorts of other crazy stuff. But at some point in time, when these things are actually out in the commercial use, that also includes every single sodding person that's on that airplane. That's who I'm responsible for. And so for me, there's part of it's candid being on that one. It's actually taking a realistic approach. It's not I'm out for me, I'm out for my team, I'm out for a land grab, I'm out to put my stake in the ground to build the biggest empire I freaking can. It's having the integrity to actually take that step back and go, what am I actually really doing here, and how do I affect change? It's number one. Number two, I think the honesty thing has to come into it as well. We wrap ourselves up, to your point, when you start off as a practitioner, you kind of come in pretty raw, let's face it. I mean, some people are polished. Those that went through college and university typically are a little more eloquent, should we say, than those of us that dragged ourselves up by the scruff of our necks from the streets. And so it is coming back to a level of reality. It's calling bullshit when you see it. And I think that what changes on the leadership side is still calling bullshit, but being able to do it maybe a little more eloquently so that people listen. Because, I mean, if you're a practitioner and you go to another practitioner, you can call bullshit all day long. I mean, I listen to the friggin' team here and it's hilarious to listen to it. But I can't take those exact words and those feelings and use them when I'm talking in leadership, but I need to convey that same message. And the only real big difference is how do I convey that message without wrapping it in too many fucking fancy words, to be perfectly honest? How do I still walk into that meeting and go, yeah, I'll be screwed, but do it in a way that's actually a little more civilized so that they will listen and won't instantly shut down? Because you know as well as I do, you walk into a boardroom or a leadership room, if you don't look right, you're automatically having to get over that first barrier. And we're way beyond just race, color, creed, orientation, religion, and everything else. We're into the fact that half the time I am sitting here wearing my hoodie. Now, the other time I'm sitting there wearing a pair of trousers and a shirt. Practitioner versus a little bit of a CISO, but it's still being true to myself. I still need to be able to look into the mirror and go, I did the best I could, the most effectively I could, and the message got across. So that would be like a longer version of the answer.
Well, no, and I'm hearing you talk about striking that right level of candor, but then also knowing your audience and how to speak to them.
Yes.
And it's kind of different when you're talking with the exec team, and then when you're talking with the board. And I know those are areas that you've had to kind of navigate as well. So, do you want to speak with whatever level of candor and candidness you feel comfortable with about kind of not specific conversations, but exec team and then board, because they feel like they're two different kind of conversations to me.
They absolutely are, but at the end of the day, we're all still human, and I think that's where a lot of people lose it. They lose it because they're like, oh, I have to be. No, they're still fucking human. They still put the trousers down or the skirt down, and they still sit in the bathroom on a fairly regular basis in the same way the rest of us do. So you still have to treat them as a human. Going in there on bended knee is not an approach that I actually like. And if there's a leader there where that bended knee approach is necessary, I'm in the wrong place. Now, is there a level of respect because of what they're doing and how they're doing it, and the fact that especially at Boom, you got a guy here who came out of the tech industry and went, I'm kind of done flying on these stupid things as slow as they're flying. I'm going to build one of these fucking things myself. I'm like, yes, I've got a shit ton load of respect for him because I know what it takes to build an organization, let alone an organization that's taking on the aviation and engineering industry. So there's respect there, but he's also still human. I can still wander and go, hey, you got a second? I can still walk up to his EA. Yeah, go on.
I was going to say that may be a good segue for a little bit to talk about kind of what are you working on now? I mean, I think people would be interested in that. I mean, obviously, as much as you can share with us, now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a number of things, and that is a good one because I turned up and we hadn't announced like the final shape of the airplane, let alone the bloody engines and all the other crazy stuff that we're working on. Let alone, I mean, I'm literally stood here. I could throw a rock and hit what we call passenger experience, which is where we have the inside. We're working on some pretty cool stuff for the passenger experience. We've got Paris. Paris is obviously happening, and some other fun things that are going on as well. And so there's design work. You're building an airplane. We've got the experimental jet out in Mojave doing some fun, crazy stuff out there. But we've also got the internals, like how's it going to look? How's it going to feel? How are passengers going to experience going on the plane, off the plane? What data can we take? What electronics? How do we safeguard? How do we secure it? As well as like the engines themselves. How are we going to design them efficiently? How are we going to be more effective than the current stuff that's out there, which is kind of fairly easy? And then a whole bunch of other kind of crazy stuff that we're doing. My job, support it, help it, make sure it gets safeguarded, make sure the business can do what it needs to do, make sure that the suppliers and vendors and supply chain can officially collaborate and communicate without me getting in the way too much, but also making sure that it doesn't end up in hands that we don't want it in. And that's everything from the physical side all the way through to the digital side. So yeah, it's a pretty extensive and fun realm, shall we say.
You mentioned Paris, and I think you guys are off for an air show coming up here in
Yeah.
a couple months. That brings to mind kind of this whole role that someone as a security leader has around talking to people about situational awareness, right? And
Yes.
when you show up in public and where competitors might need to be, and you don't want to be too candid with the wrong people.
Yeah, I just had that conversation an hour ago, and I kid you not, about wearing badges, because we have badges. We have badges that we wear in the office, and I'm great, and we have badges that are worn at the air shows and in the chalets that we have and all this kind of good stuff. And I'm like, I love it. I love the fact we do this, but do me a favor, when you walk outside, take the darn thing off. Especially when you're in a different country. Don't make yourself a target. So it's always this conversation, and it's conversation with leadership as well as teams of other folks that are going out there. It's conversation-wise stuff. It's situational awareness as to who's around, what's around, what do I say, where do I say it, what am I wearing, how much do I stand out, how much do I blend in. We're working with a third-party security team that can have boots on the ground there. So fantastic liaising with their team, and their ridiculously professional, really, really good team that we're working with. And we're talking about, primary routes, secondary routes, tertiary routes, escalation procedures, all these other good things. And you can see some of the leadership folks are like, holy smoke. And I'm like, yeah, we've got to grow up. No longer are you just a company that's got this really cool idea for having a jet. We've got the stupid thing moving. We've got some crazy stuff we're building. More and more adversaries will care about what we're doing, and therefore we have to be very careful about it. So it's taking the human approach. It's not being an arsehole about it. It's taking that human. How do I explain it in a way that they understand it and they care about it? To your point, it's a different conversation with practitioners than it is with an exec level, than it is with the board. How much of that conversation gets still to a board level where you walk into a board and go, hey, we have this, here's probability, here's risk, here's our mitigation strategy, any questions?
Being prepared and showing up in the right way, knowing who your allies are in the room, more situational awareness if you're in a certain exec meeting or that board meeting you're going into. I mean, it's always been my experience that, generally you want to make sure that everything was set up ahead of time before the official vote happens. But then that doesn't always happen, right, Chris?
And okay, now back to the candid stuff. I don't play political games. I'm not very good at them anyway, and I never have done, and I really don't give a shit about them. This comes back to that military side of the world. This is like, hey, we're all in this together. We're all getting the same fucking paycheck. Let's just get on with it. The land grab by this team and the what by this team and the political stand. No, we need to deal with that. We're going out back with a set of boxing gloves, and we'll deal with it that way. That to me is where the candid side of it comes in, because there's too much of that shit going on, and it drives me nuts. What I love about being here, I'm sitting here, Charles, who's the CIO, is sitting literally a poke away from me. Engineering is half a poke away from me over there. I've got everybody else is within literally, and we're all focused on the same thing. And I think that's so different than so many other organizations, whereas I go, well, I don't want to speak to them because of X, or the IT team doesn't talk with the network team, and the database team smell, and the security team always say no, and the users are useless because they click shit. I hate that stuff, and I'll call bullshit on them when I see it. And that's, again, I think maybe a different. I don't play politics. I kind of grab a big rock and I'm like, all right, who's ready to have a conversation?
Well, the rock based conversation sounds like we're coining a new term here. So
Isn't that itself a form of politics, though? I mean, you talk, some leaders don't want to hear FUD. It's you hear on other podcasts, hey, when we go into the boardroom, we're going to be perfectly practicing stoicism, and we don't want to get too emotional. I'm horrible at stoicism, even though I know it's a thing. And when you're talking to a C-level person, it's like, now, you can plot their emotions on this boring graph, and I'm like, I am all over the fucking place.
Yeah.
I can't do it even if I tried. And that's why you see the icon for the mascot for the Nonconformist Innovation Podcast, Chris. He has purple hair. I think when I first
Yeah.
met you through RT and a conference from Titanium, your beard was a little more colorful than it is now.
Oh, yeah.
But I
Totally.
would
Yeah.
argue that that's actually a form of politics, Chris, slightly different than the norm.
And I think that's where it is, because and I think you hit it perfectly, which is what you see is what you get. I care. And I think maybe this is just a job to me. This isn't just get a paycheck, come in, leave, whatever. I care. And I care enough that you're going to know how I feel. You're going to know what I think. You're going to know where I stand on certain situations and stuff like that. And it was a very different, you want to talk about board meetings. The first board meeting I turned up, yeah, I was somewhat civilized. I had the shirt on, I had trousers on, I had my funny feet on, my vibrance. I think my beard was probably colored as well. And you could tell they were like, what the heck is it? This is different than what we've normally been expecting in all of our other boards and our other companies. Is it going to
No
eat us, or is
chinos,
it going to be
no
useful?
slacks.
Yeah, no, no, no. And I've changed it up. I do it deliberately. Like this last board meeting I turned up, I had like a nice pair of tailored trousers. I had a purple jacket on. And you could tell they were like, what the hell? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just going to interviews. You're fine. Don't worry about it. And you could tell they were like, you son of a bitch. But I think it gets to that because you open yourself up, which is good and bad. You open yourself up for attack. You open yourself up and you've got to sometimes defend. You open yourself up for abuse sometimes. But if you open yourself up at that point in time, this is who I am. Either you accept me or you don't. And you're right, there is a form of politics in that one. But I would much rather be, this is who I am, this is what you get, there's no messing around, and deal with it, rather than just try to play any kind of like hidden game, if that makes any sense. I
It
just
sounds
back
like
to
a
that, be
tabletop
honest.
exercise, like a simulation of a breach in the boardroom before it actually happens. And if you can condition
Well,
them
yeah.
in the boardroom, hey, hackers aren't going to look nearly as friendly as I do.
Well, I am a hacker, let's face it. Let's start with the easy one. I am a hacker, and this is how I look. And let's face it, from an adversarial standpoint, the attackers definitely come in different shapes and forms and features and stuff. And you're right, they ain't as friendly, and they're sure as hell not going to give you a warning. Well, maybe they will, and you probably missed it.
Well, that tabletop exercise, you're bringing that up is an interesting one as well, Steve. So, Chris, I'm sure you've done plenty of different types of
Oh, yeah.
exercises. You've done the red, you've been on the blue side, you've done these types of things there. Have you
Yeah.
ever had a successful tabletop with your exec team that kind of helped bring them around?
Oh yeah, we had a fun as all hell one. This is back in the day as I was doing consulting, and we were in a healthcare organization, and they had their CIO and their CISO in there, and we'd done some exercises with them, and the challenge became one of that their CISO was always answering the questions. He wouldn't necessarily let anybody else get an answer in, and it was interesting because the team very much so just when you ask a question, the team just looked straight at him. And he just answered, and it was always interesting because nobody typically challenged him as much. Very, very nice guy, but very just he was the leader, shall we say? And so we went through a couple of exercises. We were like, all right, we have to change this. We have to help him understand where maybe he's failing and maybe some behavioral changes. So we went into this tabletop exercise and we're like, okay, we're declaring an incident. And he's like, well, I'm ready. I'm like, actually, it's because he used to race cars. And we're like, well, actually, it's a Sunday. We're declaring the incident. You're actually out of the track. You got a notification. And unfortunately, due to this and this, you just crashed your car. You're actually on your way to the hospital at the moment. You're going to have to listen. And you're on the way to the hospital. You got to
Yeah.
listen. And then we started working through it, and his team would keep going this. I'm like, you're in hospital. You got to listen. And really, really quickly, and to his credit, he actually came to us afterwards. He's like, thank you. My team have kind of talked about this, but this was the first time it's been put in front of me that I do need to shut up and let others talk. And it was a fantastic way of doing it. And it was really nice to see. And to his credit, he was accepting of the situation.
That's great to hear. It makes me think a bit about, you do some self-reflection about your leadership style, especially as you kind of
Yeah.
grow in your career and things like that. So the one thing that sticks in my head, and I'd love to hear if there's, maybe a saying you have around this is, and I love to cook. I love to eat really good food. I think that's one thing we have in common. We'll talk maybe about, like I said, Hacker Summer Camp later and other activities, but on the food front. So if you talk about chefs, I've always said, I want to be more Thomas Keller and less Gordon Ramsay.
Yes. So in the UK, there was a gentleman, and unfortunately he passed away several years ago. I don't remember exactly when. It was Floyd, Keith Floyd, and it was Floyd on food. If anybody's listening in on this one, look him up online. In fact, I'm actually going to do a quick YouTube search while we're doing this now, because I'm pretty sure. Gosh, I hope he did. I hope he's up on YouTube. I hope people have actually put some of his stuff up on there. Floyd on food. He is. Yes. Oh my gosh. Keith Floyd, he was amazing. He would basically cook. He'd have ingredients all over the place, but he would typically cook. He would have a bottle or a glass of wine in one hand and ingredients and stuff in the other hand, and it would just come together. It's like magic happened, and it's kind of like there was that Australian painter years and years ago that did the kid stuff and everything else, and he'd be like, and here we go, and and you're like, what the heck is he doing? And in the end you stand back and you're like, the hell did that come from? And it was just amazing to see somebody take what appeared to be nothing and make something absolutely amazing out of it. And I love it because that's food. That's our industry. That's incident response 101. You are walking into a burning building. I mean, no two ways about it. Shit's going wrong. Everybody's running around their heads. You are the one that has to walk into that burning building and go, and here we go. And
You're going to
coordinate
take
and
this
come out.
line.
Yeah.
You're going to take the,
Yeah.
the grill line. And
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Do you know who has access to your data and how it's being used? Are you facing challenges with securing data across your multi-cloud environments? Well, I want to introduce you to my friends over at TrustLogix. Securing data in use has become a formidable challenge in today's complex IT landscape, where data is scattered across the cloud with complex dependencies between data and security teams. That's where TrustLogix steps in with its cloud-native data security platform. The TrustLogix solution was designed to tackle the intricacies of multi-cloud data security. It centralizes security observability and simplifies the implementation of fine-grained access controls across diverse platforms like Snowflake, Redshift, Databricks, and many others. This means you can secure your data across all clouds without the headaches of traditional methods. So don't let the complexity of multi-cloud security overwhelm you and your teams. You can learn more at trustlogix.io. That is trustlogix with an X.io/Candid CISO to learn how TrustLogix can streamline your data security and give you peace of mind. Secure your data, empower your teams, and lead your organization confidently into the future with TrustLogix.
Yeah, it's interesting because you hear that the word chef, right, was from chief. So how do you become that chief, that leader that is not the one that's yelling at everyone and they're still getting their work done? It's a challenge, right?
It's a human thing. So this comes back to, we look at the role of a CISO. The role of a CISO isn't just, I would argue, it isn't just to be that technical source. I mean, that's why you have senior leaders. That's why you have fellows. I love the fact when you walk into a company and they have a track for fellows, which is like amazes hell, and you got the track for the lunatics of us that decide we want to try and deal with humans sometimes. But with that, to your point, comes that introspective reflection to go, am I somebody who can deal with people, or am I somebody who just wants to deal with tech? And if I can deal with people, how do I become somebody who knows the right questions to ask, who knows the different types of people, and who knows how to get the best out of them they possibly can, and who knows how to support them and manage them and be there as the shield, but also be the steel toe cap boot when you need to be, and do those balances. And that isn't always something you can read in a book. It's not always something you can get out of a strength finder or something like that. It's something you learn by watching other people. It's something you learn by listening. It's something you learn by having good mentors and by asking good questions. So that's
There
how
are a
I look
couple
at
of
it.
pieces in that calculus, Chris. You started off by talking about protecting. And
Yeah.
what are you protecting? You're going to be protecting people, stakeholders, right?
Yep.
You can protect revenue
People.
and shareholders, but I think if you see your mission as broadly to protect, you view stakeholders almost equally on same footing as shareholders.
I've always looked at it, and I've challenged people about this. You go to some of the, like, not necessarily Hacker Summer Camp, but you look at maybe like some of the bigger conferences, the more corporate ones, without naming names. I've always wanted to challenge, and I have done it a few times online. I've challenged people. I'm like, okay, you go take grandmother, grandfather, and the kids of data you just lost, and you walk them around the floor of this conference. Would they be happy about the fact that we're doing the best we can, or would they be absolutely appalled about the fact it's nothing more than a circus? If you can't do that in good conscience, then you shouldn't be part of that issue. You should be part of the way of challenging it and how do we solve it more effectively.
It brings up to me kind of the rise of a lot of these conferences that have come up besides the main conference, like the
Yeah,
B-sides whole section.
like the
Um,
B-sides. Yep.
I will mention one. I was just down in Southern California. Amazon had one of their big security focused conferences, which is
Yeah.
Reinforce. They have
Reinforce. Yep.
Reinvent. And there's a great group of cloud security practitioners that have created their own thing called Forward, FWD, CloudSec. So they're like, hey, you're trying to be just replying. We're moving forward. And these guys were talking about
Nice.
amazing topics. And so I guess, to me, where do you find those spots of inspiration, and how do you get your team members to go to things like that? I mean,
It makes perfect sense. I think you're right, because I mean, I've got my home, my kind of spiritual. I got two, and one I'm actually heading out to, which is Cyber Week in Israel. I love that one because of the diversity of the conference. You get 60, 70 countries turn up, if not more, and it's fantastic. But my home US and stateside is GERCON up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's in, I know what year, 10, 11, 12, whatever the heck we're in at this point in time. And to me, it has that amazing ethos of B-sides conferences. It maintains the integrity. It's half students. It's half, it has some absolutely amazing people in there. And I love the questioning. I love the fact it still challenges. I love the fact that your booth is still nothing more than an 8 by 8 square with a tablecloth. They don't allow anything else. Y'all are on a level playing field. Get used to it. And you hear on your merits kind of thing. And so for me, those are great. I find them through word of mouth. I find them from being part of the community. I'm very fortunate I get invited to them. And what I do with the team here is I'm like, hey, you all want to come along? We're going, Hacker Summer Camp. I mean, I'm renting a house, and we'll bring as many of the team as we can along, and we'll use it as a safe space, and everybody can go out and have fun and get arrested, and then we know where the hell they are, kind of thing. So it's a fun way of doing that, and you encourage. It's like, hey, there's this conference going on, go to it. I'm also fortunate that one of the crew, Justin, who I'm actually seeing here, he runs the car hacking village. That's his and a bunch of others. That's their baby. I mean, you've got some amazing people as part of it. That's his baby as part of it now. So I bring people in. We bring people in from the community. Tara is doing a shed ton load of GRC. She just did a whole bunch of LinkedIn Live stuff, which goes public soon, very soon, actually, this month or next month. So I love the fact that I'll bring people in from the community to work, I won't say for me, but with me inside Boom. And that's how we do it.
I think that's a great thing, and bringing up the car hacking village. I've had the privilege, and just for our audience members who aren't aware of what Hacker Summer Camp is, that's Black Hat, DEF CON, B-Sides Las Vegas, all these other little gatherings that happen in Las Vegas in the summertime. And I know, Chris, you mentioned you're going to be taking some team there. I would definitely use that as a way to bring team members together, to try to mentor new folks in. But it can be kind of a grind, over the time that's there. I guess, maybe a couple words on finding your right tribe at these types of things, and maybe suggestions for folks to, hey, do you want to be in the blue team or the red team or the car hacking, or how do you, any recommendations you might have for folks,
Yeah.
from someone who's been in these.
Been in it a few times. I think for me, I go there nowadays to see family. That's how I look at it. So for me, I think the very first thing to do is go in there and just talk to people, walk up and introduce yourself, but also go to the villages. A lot of us, somewhat introvert, don't like walking up to strangers. So go hit the village, sit down and ask questions. The talks are okay, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't spend the entire time at the talks, because you'll miss some of really what brings the conferences together, which is the people. You go sit in a room, you listen to people like me and others that are out here as well. That's fun. But do me a favor, only spend 25, 35% of your time there. Spend the rest of the time walking the halls. Spend the rest of the time in the villages. Go to the parties. Go hang out. Go meet people. Actually, go around the vendor area as well. As much as I have a love-hate on that side, they tend to put the money towards the conferences that allow them to happen. So if nothing else, I typically will go to most of these conferences with a shopping list. Hey, I'm searching for identity management solutions, or I'm searching for this, or I'm looking to do stuff with data security. So I'll walk the hall at least on some of them, and I'll make introductions and be like, first and foremost, thanks for being here. Secondly, it sounds like you're doing something interesting. A, you don't get to scan my badge, but B, give me a business card and I'll come in contact with you. So The villages are great. I mean, there's so many of them. Everything from like the hacking villages to the hardware hacking villages to the wireless to the wall of sheep to all the other ones that are out there doing things. That's the community coming together. That I think is absolutely key. But a lot of the conferences will also put on like their parties for the evening. Go along, hang out, and kind of come out of the shell a little bit. But even go online to like LinkedIn or any of the other profile sites online. Come here, talk to the audience that's here, and go, hey, are you going there? So that way, maybe if it's your first time, you got a friendly shit. Come find me, for crying out loud. I'll introduce you to people. There's so many of us out there that are approachable. There are definitely some muppets in the out there in our industry, unfortunately, who are not approachable. But for the most part, most of us are relatively approachable, even if we are drunk. And I always have a whiskey case with me, so come find me and I'll share a drink with you.
You heard it here, guys, on the Candid CISO podcast. Chris is volunteering to be your DEF CON Sherpa if you can find him. And, he's
Yeah,
pretty recognizable. I'm pretty recognizable, but, I think,
yeah, I'll be there. I might have the kilt on, I might not do, but the beard will definitely be coloured. And let's face it, just ask somebody where the hell's Side Dragon. They'll find me.
Well, since you brought up that one handle, and in the interest of candor, I need to share with our audience members. So Chris will talk a little bit more about this, but I got a T-shirt that says "I am Cydragon" for part of an EFF, fundraiser, the Electronic Frontiers Foundation, and it was actually not at a security conference. I was taking my daughter to go see FanimeCon, which is kind of the anime and fans of science fiction and stuff like that based in San Jose. And this gentleman came up to me. He said, "Where did you get that T-shirt? I was there when we made these ones." And so I'm just bringing this up as a way of saying, you never know where you'll find these connections in community. And so anything you want to
Totally.
say about kind of that era and that fundraiser that you helped with the EFF with?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's interesting now, isn't it, that I'm now on the inside of an industry that I was throwing rocks at for so long. I'm a researcher. I mean, I research interesting things. I mean, and it started off, we were researching cars, part of the village and everything else. We were trying to figure out how cars worked and how we could make them work the way we wanted to. We deviated off into hacking cows and hacking trains, but we ended up looking at the aviation world, and we did it in as much of a collaborative way as we could. We found a lot of stuff. We tried to advise people of things that were going on, and unfortunately, it didn't work. I mean, I think part of it was the industry wasn't ready to hear. The industry wasn't at a point where it knew how to process the information, let alone what to do with it, let alone how to deal with it. And we ran afoul of that. I mean, to a long story short, we ran pretty badly afoul of that for a bunch of reasons. It caused a lot of angst, grief, and hassle. It caused a lot of angst, grief, and hassle. It caused some issues and challenges, and unfortunately caused some hardship that still is to this day. The upside is aviation village has gone from strength to strength, no two ways about it. The industry, some of the players in the industry have definitely gone strength to strength. And one of them, let's face it, brought me back in. So we're having some fantastic conversations. We're looking how to change the industry to be more efficient, more effective, and do the right things. It's a journey. It always is. This whole industry is a journey. There's no actual solution. It's all a game of chess, unfortunately, and both internally as well as with our adversaries. So, yeah, I'm here. I'm on the inside.
Speaking of games, can I ask a question? I think one of the things that stands out to me is the interest that the boardroom has in gambling, quite literally. We talked about this while prepping for this episode, how the role of the
Yeah,
CISO has evolved from looking in the rearview mirror to looking at what's happening today to predicting the future.
yeah,
There's some research, you said you're a researcher, that actually demonstrated the trend line of data breaches decreasing, but predictive models showed data breaches increasing, but that's only to 2019. I think, since then it's probably a different story. So here's like a three-part question as the same audience is recovering from those conference places that you mentioned. I can't remember what you called them.
yeah,
What should they be thinking about in terms of bringing something valuable or useful back to the boardroom about what they learned, how to shift their focus
yeah.
from risk management to predicting the future and protecting their company and their assets and their asses.
I mean, that's a fantastic question. And it's probably relevant for us, probably more than a lot of organizations, because what we're building now won't be commercially available until several years time. So if I build something with today's technology from today's systems, and I try to put it in something in 5-10 years time, it's going to be outdated. So from my standpoint, as I start to look, as I walk the halls, as I walk around, I do care what we're doing about things today, but I want to know who's throwing that crystal ball a little bit further out. Who's taking a look? Perfect example. Let's take a look at identity. Identity is a crazy, convoluted, complicated, asinine, ass about face solution that everybody's thrown every acronym known to mankind at, and we still haven't figured out whose fucking hands are on the keyboard. I mean, tell me I'm wrong. Passwords, we've had them for 40 odd years, and still the most prevalent one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Put some complication in it, you add 7, 8, and 9. So how do we change that? And so you start taking a look at the companies that are trying to change it differently, looking through things through a different lens. You're taking a look at transportation. In my case, where are we in transportation? In its infancy. Where are we going? Who's going to help us get there? Who's focusing on what tomorrow's problems are? And who's looking at, and I'm not taking the next buzzword, I'm not looking at that, but I want to know like concrete hard issues. Who's taking a look? Perfect example with us, we're flying something that's burning fuel. Well, how do we do it sustainably? How do we do it looking at what tomorrow's problems are going to be? We're going to run out of certain types of things. How do we do things in a sustainable manner? How do we bring the next level of technology into this, and we start looking at where it's going to be? Is it intelligent systems? Probably yes. Is it today's ChatGPT systems? Hopefully not. And so who's pushing those boundaries? And you start talking to those companies, or you take a step back and go, who's putting those companies in the conferences? What vulture venture capitalist organizations are doing that? What countries are doing it? Where should I be spending some time looking at conferences? Do I still go back to Israel? Do I go look at Turkey? Turkey has this fire to be the next Israel. You look at Saudi. Saudi has the fire to be the next tech hub of Dubai. So where should we be looking to actually help foster that, put some time into it and say, hey, let's collaborate, let's work on this. That's how I look at it.
I like how you bring it back to, again, human relationships, conversations, and that's what it does take for us to get there. You did bring up the Gen AI specter just a little bit there. That seems to be the super heated topic of the moment, and it is a little scary how good some of these things are getting. But
Yes.
I guess any thoughts on whether it's the Google Bard, the ChatGPT, the whatever
Yeah.
large language models we're looking at these days.
There we go. Yeah, exactly. Big old pool of data, and we're trying to make sense of the darn stuff. Nothing changes. We just give it a different name, don't we? Yeah. I mean, it's a challenge because up to recently, we had pretty good safety bars on most of the tech that we'd put out there. It wasn't, maybe it was in there for human consumption in a general way, or the mass consumption in a general way, but we really didn't let it loose on the masses. Now we handed it to the masses without any warning labels or without any instructions, and it's interesting to see the results. My concern is we've handed it over without training people to ask more questions. We've trusted it. And I think that's my biggest thing. It comes back to security. It's, trust less, validate more, whichever way you want to look at it. I mean, we talk about trust but validate or any of this. To me, it's the other way around. It really has to be this stage. It's like, hey, you asked ChatGPT a question. Great. I love the answer. Let me go check it somewhere else. 2 or 3 other different places, maybe. And I'm actually doing a talk on this a couple of days' time. Doing a pre-recorded one because I'm flying when they're officially releasing it, and it very much is about. It comes back to the human. It's how do we educate people rather than just simply hand them a loaded weapon, which in this case is an intelligent system that lies, not deliberately, but it just lies. It makes shit up as it goes along, and we haven't been trained to ask it questions. It's an authoritative figure in the digital realm. It's the same thing. You get stopped. You get stopped by a police officer or a law enforcement individual. How many of you? The first question is like, when they say, "Hey, can I see your license?" Yeah, can I see your identification? We don't do that. We assume that the authority is there, rather than saying, "Love your idea. I'll hand you my license, but do me a favor. Just give me some identification so I can actually validate that you are who you are." Now, let's just be very blunt about this. I'm 6'3". I'm white. I'm an elderly guy. The chances of a police officer going, "Don't be such a smart ass, Sonny," and smacking me upside the head are pretty negligible. If I wasn't the color and the size and the orientation I am, the chances are I'd probably get a smackdown, let's be honest, which sucks because that's not how it should be. In the digital world, we need to teach people to actually ask more questions before they trust things. So yeah, there's my little political thing to go with today's hand grenades.
Well, we are looking for candid conversations, so I appreciate
Well,
that very much.
yeah, let's face it, you're gonna get it from me. Let's just be honest about this one.
So this is one point, and I know you've got a packed day, and we really appreciate you.
No, this is good. I enjoy the conversations.
No, that's awesome. I guess one of the questions I've got, because we're speaking to our CISO peers and other people who are leaders in this realm. A lot of times people talk about, how do I, break into the security field? How do I kind of, earn my chops? And on the other side of that, we talk about, hey, there's all these open positions that we're trying to fill, at the same time.
Yes.
I mean, I guess there's two parts to that. One is advice to folks breaking into this field. And it's very different from when you and I were coming up, right? There are now degree programs on cybersecurity and stuff like that. And
yeah, it's formal stuff. I'm like,
yeah, and that's the path for some people, but
yes,
people take the different paths they get to get there. So for those people trying to kind of get themselves established, and then for those kind of middle managers to try to think maybe creatively about bringing those people in.
All right, so I'm going to hit the middle managers first because that's the part that annoys the hell out of me, to be honest. I think what ends up, and what I've seen too often, is leadership inside an organization says, "Oh, I need an IT analyst, or I need another person on help desk or an IT analyst. Doesn't really matter what." And they're like, "People team or HR team, go deal with that for me. Go find me somebody." And the HR team goes, "Well, yeah, I could do a sitting down with you for half an hour to determine what we need." No, just go Google it. And yeah, people team do the best they can. They're like, well, shit, I'm going to go Google an HR person. Well, they need this, and they need this, and they need this, and they need experience, and they need this, and all of a sudden they've got a list this long, and they're like, well, is this right? And the management person inside the company on the IT, oh yeah, it's fine, just post it, it'll be fine. That doesn't work. That's not collaborative. So this is where you sit down and you're more efficient, you're more effective. You're like, hey, what do I actually need? Well, I need somebody who's got a basic understanding of this and a basic understanding of this. I need some of this. Now, conversely, the people team also need to learn not to put it into plain old business speak all the time. And the degree requirement needs to go away, or degree or equivalent experience. Take your pick on that one. And I think we also need to stop putting such a long list together, because a really good friend, Charles, actually pointed out to me, he's like, you put a list of 10 things together, most gentlemen are going to look at it and go, yeah, I've got 6 of those, I'll be fine. Unfortunately, that's not the same for others. They'll look at it and go, oh my gosh, I only have 4 or 5 of those, I shouldn't apply. So that list needs to be much more defined, but also, hey, there's a caveat that, hey, you only need 4 or 5 of these. We don't need the whole list of things. Give me 4 or 5 of them. So there's a level of realism that needs to be put into the post, number one. Number two, the hiring person also maybe needs to get out onto LinkedIn or go to the conference with an open mind to going, hey, I got some people. I can help. I can train them. Who's got the integrity? Who has got the drive? Who has got the fire? And who can I train up more efficiently? So there's got to be that. It takes more work on our part, but it pays dividends. So that's one. Now, conversely, let's look at it the other side. If I'm looking to break in, I shouldn't just be throwing resumes everywhere, because that shit just doesn't work. I shouldn't necessarily be paying a recruiter to do the same thing, because that doesn't work either. Maybe I should go get certificates, because that's how some people look at it. But maybe I can do my own research. I can publish something. I can go to a conference and say, hey, I've just spent the last 6 months working on how to adapt one of these things to break into these, and I'd love to just publish my journey. I'd love to talk about it. I can get onto LinkedIn. I can have that conversation on LinkedIn.
For our listening audience, I just have to point out that Chris has been showing one of the hot security toys of the springtime. You want to share with what that one is?
My precious. It is a Flipper Zero. For the listening audience, it is a Flipper Zero. It is a Swiss Army knife of of the electromagnetic spectrum of signals and all sorts of fun things you can do with it. Basically, you can change channels, you can get into garages, you can open cars, you can do all sorts of other fun things, and it's a really good learning tool. And there's all sorts of other fun things. But yeah, so I think, if I'm coming into the industry, research the flipper, or heck, if I can't afford one because the stupid things can be expensive, go down to Micro Center and go buy yourself an Arduino for $20 and learn on that. Use a journey, go research the community, be part of the community, contribute to the community. Turn up at DEF CON, get a free ticket for DEF CON because they're out there, and come in and be part of the village. You'll get noticed that way. People like me look for people like that and go, hey, you want to come and hang out? You want to join? Volunteer. All the conferences look for volunteers. Go volunteer time, because guess what? You'll make friends, you'll talk with people, you'll be seen in the community, and folks will come up and going, hey, what are you doing? Well, I'm looking for a job. Well, what are you looking for? Well, hey, I've got an opening over here. You want to come and hang out? And so that to me is probably one of the best ways. Or get knowing people on LinkedIn. Hit us up on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm looking for something. What do you got? So there's ways to do it.
In 15 seconds, I would just, for the managers, you need a moral compass, probably more than you need a risk register. You need a moral compass. For those trained to break in, the data science and economics disciplines are going to help differentiate and give you more tools. Hacking skills are valuable. Data science and economics are going to give you a much needed, valuable lens and tool set to apply your hacker skills in a business context.
Let me give you two others to add to that. That's really, really flipping good points. The ability to articulate is key. Like, you can break into everything to mankind, but if you can't put it down on writing, or you can't actually discuss it with somebody about what you did, how you did it, and the findings and what you need to do to fix it, you're no use to man nor beast. And the second one is know about the business. Do a little bit of business research. Why would a business care? Probability. We talk about risk. We talk about leadership. How do you talk to those different tiers? Yeah, perfect. Great example, Steve. Thank you.
Well, hey, I really appreciated the conversation here today. Before we sign off, I guess I want to say, any advice you have for people trying to walk that line, right, of being candid enough to get your point across? Or do you feel like you've just been out there and you've made it work?
I've made mistakes. I think that's the fact. You've got to accept you're going to make mistakes. And sometimes you have to be ready to apologize for those mistakes. I've walked into meetings and I've said my piece, and there are some people that have been like, oy vey, and there are some people that have gotten it. And I've had conversations with somebody afterwards. I did it recently here. I asked him a question, and I forget my size. And so I asked a question, and I thought I was okay, but apparently it came across as, I'm going to chew your head off and I'm going to spit out the rest. And I'm like, I didn't mean that, but I have to be humble enough to be able to walk up to them and say, look, I'm ever so sorry. That's not what I meant. That's not how I meant it to come across. Help me understand how to be more effective at how to talk with you. And so if you're going to go in with the balls to the wall rock conversation, you've also got to be ready to be able to. But to your point, John, both you, John, and Steve, you both said the conversation was just read the room. So be prepared to have a conversation with other people in their language as well, and the way they're receptive to it. You can read people pretty easily as long as you spend the time understanding how to do it. So, yeah. I don't know, be humble enough, ready enough to when you're wrong, and actually be accepting enough to actually stand up and say, hey, I'm wrong. How do I do it differently?
I think that's good advice for us here. I think we've had a great, candid conversation. I guess I will kick it back to Steve. As we mentioned, he's helped get us started here. Any last questions you've got for Chris, or thoughts you want to leave our group with?
So many great ideas here. I think the idea of a CISO that has an MBA with communication skills is the next modern CISO. We can't just be hackers. We need to layer that with new nuance at all levels, right? Bring your data science, bring your economics, bring your business, bring your communication skills, and layer that with your hacking skills. And you have a powerful combination for a next gen leader.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree.
Excellent. Well, I feel like we're kind of hitting towards a wrap. I want to say we'll maybe give Chris a couple minutes back in his super busy schedule here. I'll say I'm looking forward to seeing you at Hacker Summer Camp.
You too, sir. You too, definitely.
Thank you so much for being our guest here today.
No, I'm honored and I appreciate it. Thank you very much, the pair of you. And absolutely Godspeed and good luck and all that other ones.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Cheers, John. Cheers, Chris. Take care. Bye now. The Candid CISO podcast is a production of Nonconformist Innovation Media. If you enjoyed this episode, would you please consider sharing it with a colleague or maybe subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts? You can read show notes or find other episodes at CandidCISO.com. You can join our community at connect.nonconformistinnovation.com. Sign in and look for the Candid CISO group. It's free to join. Thanks and a shout out to Brad Parsons of Train Sound Studio for audio engineering and mastering of this podcast. And thanks to you, our listening audience, for the encouragement, feedback, and your participation. It means a lot to me.